For further analysis on geopolitical forces that will shape the year ahead, Adriano Bosoni is the Director of Analysis at RANE, and he speaks to us live from Barcelona in Spain. Mr. Bosoni, picking up from that story, it's worth reminding, China's on its 14th five-year plan now. The next one starts. This is a country that works in planning cycles, not election cycles. Could any action by the US in Venezuela have any effect on calibrations for President Xi Jinping?
I don't think so, because China's calculation when it comes to Taiwan and many other issues are connected to its own capacity, to its own perception of how viable these actions, such as military intervention in Taiwan, would be. So while China will probably use the United States' actions in Venezuela and other parts of the world to present itself as a defender of a rules-based international order or a defender of international institutions, its own military calculations on issues like Taiwan have not changed. China will act on Taiwan when it feels that it's ready, when it feels that it can succeed in an intervention. And this is not connected to whatever the United States or in particular the Trump administration does in places like Venezuela or other parts of the world.
Taiwan, of course, a point of friction between China and Japan, and it's worth spelling out details. So Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi in November in Parliament answering a question about what she saw as survival-threatening situations for Tokyo, and Taiwan was brought into it. If we look at the geographical location of Taiwan, China and Japan, we can take a look there, and the military drills that have been taking place on a regular basis by China around Taiwan, where do you see frictions between China and Japan playing out this year?
They will play out around Japan's defense moves. This is a government that has a very expansive fiscal policy, which includes an increase in its military spending, in part because of its own strategic priorities and in part because of pressure from the United States, which wants its partners in Europe, in the Pacific, in other parts of the world to do more to protect themselves. So Japan will increase military spending this year, and this will continue to create frictions with China. And of course, we know that China has many different ways it can react to Japan's moves. The reaction could be through economic coercion, like targeting bilateral trade, or it could take a more aggressive form in the shape of military drills, air incursions, and so on. So China has a very vast toolkit when it comes to signaling to its neighbors that it's unhappy with what their neighbors are doing, and we will probably see a combination of these tools in 2026.
Oh, China, an economic power, increasingly unafraid to also deploy its military power. If we look at the world now, I think your report outlines the large powers militarily, so that's the US, Russia, not economically, certainly militarily, and China, and concerns that each one is no longer afraid to seize at any cost what it sees as its own sphere of influence.
Yeah, one of the main narratives in RANE's 2026 annual forecast, which we published at the beginning of this week, is that we are in an age of a multipolar world. We have the United States, China, Russia, and others defining their spheres of influence and being very aggressive in their protection of what they perceive are their spheres of influence. We saw that in Russia's invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago. We see that with the United States openly saying that the Western Hemisphere is its natural sphere of influence and they don't want any external powers messing around with that region. We see it in China often coercing, pressuring, signaling to Taiwan and others that it's willing to take military action to protect its interests. But to make things more complicated, this not only applies to great powers, it only applies to middle powers. And we saw clashes between India and Pakistan last year, clashes between Cambodia and Thailand. So we are in an age in which main powers, but also middle powers and other smaller countries are willing to be very assertive in order to protect their, what they perceive to be their national interests. And this is a significant source of instability and questions about the future of geopolitical relations around the world.
All right, geopolitics, a very big part of that is geo. In fact, the moment geography is involved, conflicts become very difficult to resolve. So Russia and Ukraine, obvious reasons, closer to home here in Singapore, Thailand and Cambodia. Conflicts like these, when you have a truce, and we did see partial ceasefires, which are holding for now in Thailand and Cambodia, suggestions and concerns that they fail to address much more deep-rooted difficulties, and usually they involve crisis, territory, border territory.
Exactly, and with these clashes, what we always need to keep in mind is the escalation ladder, right? There is a significant chance that conflicts that start very localized, very narrow in scope, unless there are significant drivers for a de-escalation, they could potentially spiral out of control. We saw that in the case of Cambodia and Thailand last year, right? Where there was pressure from the United States, threats to impose tariffs and other coercive measures, which temporarily suspended the fight. But only a few months later, the tensions started again because both sides felt that they could achieve more through military means. And the same is true for many other parts of the world. The situation between India and Pakistan right now is calm, but there are structural issues at play. There are disputed territories in Kashmir and other parts of the border. There's the mutual suspicion of the use of militants to conduct terror attacks in each other's territory. There's disputes about the future of the Indus River, which is vital for Pakistan, and India is now threatening to stop applying the bilateral treatment on the management of the river. So we are in a situation in which most of the conflicts around the world are connected to structural issues that are so deep that a simple US threat of economic coercion or even an air attack may not be enough to end them.
A final question, Mr. Bosoni. Pressure from the US might come from domestic pressure, and not least from those midterms later this year. That might make other countries or the US itself more or less prepared to exert pressure to find truces to conflicts.
Yeah, so the United States, the current Trump presidency is different from the first Trump presidency in the sense that it's more willing than before to use economic coercion. We saw that in the threat of imposing tariffs, unless its trading partners did whatever the United States wanted them to do, but also in the use of military force. We saw attacks against Venezuela, but before that we saw attacks against Iran, Syria, and other places. So this is an administration that is willing, maybe more willing than during its first term, to use this combination of military threats, economic threats, and be very, very clear about what it wants. In the case of Venezuela, they are very clear that it's about oil and not so much about democracy or regime change. And they are more willing to be very, very explicit about their goals and not worry too much about a legal justification or resorting to international institutions to try to come up with a joint solution. This is an administration that is willing to act very unilaterally, even potentially against its own allies, which explains why the European Union is so worried about US threats on, for instance, Greenland. So more than ever, in recent decades at least, this is a US administration that feels that it can act unilaterally when it feels that it can, and it will not worry too much about legal or any other kinds of justifications for its actions.
Thanks, Adriano Bosoni, Director of Analysis at RANE.